John D. Villarreal. And wow, we just got done with the live spaces with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It was live on X, and I listened to it, took some notes. We're going to be joined by Paul Villarreal here. He's on the line now. Incredible. They covered a lot of ground over 2 hours. There were tens of millions of people viewing it. I saw at least 1.1, 1.3, 1.2. It constantly varied. Millions of people on it at one time. Elon guesstimated that over the course of weeks there'd be 100 million plus or hundreds of millions of people that would watch it. At 7:47 p.m. here, it was like almost 28 million, like 27.9 million views on the spaces. There was a little bit of some choppiness at the beginning in terms of getting things happening. I don't know if there was a DNS attack, allegedly, some different things like that. Now, I've got very extensive notes here. I know Paul does as well. I will say in the beginning right here, that all of this is a paraphrase. Some of these are going to be more accurate than others. Cool. I was typing as fast as I can. But let's just say for the record here that all these are, everything's in our opinion only, and everything's basically a paraphrase as best as we could. And then we'll get our commentary as we go here. And they covered a lot of ground. It was a PA event. They started with that, and Trump sort of went through that because, Elon was talking about that and asked some questions. They talked about immigration and border. They talked about inflation and foreign policy. They talked about the deep state. They talked a lot about the economy, and Trump really wanted to come back to the economy. So you could see him coming back to that general policy and stuff like that. They both obviously had their notes and obviously had things that they wanted to sort of talk about. And I think that we definitely saw and heard that. I'm going to go through a bunch of quotes here. I'm going to bring Paul in here in a second. We're going to try to keep this kind of tight. We're looking forward to your comments as well. My overall impression, Paul, is there was a lot of regular sound bites, and it wasn't like super polished, in my opinion, but overall a very engaging, authentic, smart, heavily policy-focused conversation. And in my opinion, like both Trump and I think, Elon talked about this, I think it's hard to imagine either Biden or Kamala doing an unscripted, no-holds-barred talk like this and doing and with Elon and doing as well, in my opinion. What's your take on this and the overall talk? What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought you summarized it really well there, John, which is this was a conversation. This was an informal but high-level conversation between two intelligent and accomplished men who weren't going through any of the media filters. This wasn't an adversarial encounter. It was, what do you think about this? Well, what about this? What about that? As you mentioned, economy, immigration. They talked about climate change and talked about it in a very intelligent and scientific way. They talked about where is America heading? Are we at a crossroads? What might happen if Trump is elected? What might happen if he is not elected? I thought it was fantastic. And it did, as you mentioned, got off to a little bit of a late start because of whatever technical issues were going on. But when the stream ended, it peaked at 1.3 million viewers just on Twitter, on X. That's not, I listened to it. I actually listened to it on YouTube, and there were multiple streams of that on YouTube. It peaked at 1.3 million on Twitter. And I don't know if that includes people listening anonymously, but when it ended, it was still at 1.1 million.
Yeah.
That's 2
Crazy.
hours.
No, let me correct you.
People really like this.
I just got the updated things. Right. I mean, what it's showing here on @Real Donald Trump is 2.1 million tuned in. It's showing showing 73.6 million views. And it's showing that the spaces went for just over 3 hours. 3 hours and 26 seconds, which is just incredible. And then again, we're right now. It's 10:54 Eastern Standard Time. I would assume, and Trump is on. If he's in Florida, is on Eastern Standard Time as well. I'm not sure of that. I don't know where he is at this point in the campaign or anything. But I mean, just absolutely incredible. Again, that level of endurance, that level of mental acuity, having that conversation and stuff like that. And it's funny because I actually talked to a lot of heavy hitters business people today. It just happened to, and just getting sort of the temperature of some people that were for Harris and for Biden and for Trump, definitely, and just getting a sort of a mix of what's out there and sort of what the thought process is. But before we get into that and our commentary, and again, we're about the 5-minute mark here. Maybe we'll go to like 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to keep it pretty tight here. Let me just hit at a high level here of what was going on. Trump recounted this is my notes, right? And you can see if I missed anything, Paul, and comment as well. Trump talked about the recount of the PA Butler PA event. So, I think we've heard that, and that was very interesting. And it was interesting having Elon coming in and asking questions and kind of digging deeper, if you will, and kind of giving his feedback on that. They also talked about the immigration and border, and Trump says he's going to shut down illegal immigration, and that Kamala is quote unquote fake, changing position. And again, everything I'm saying here is a paraphrase, right? Changing position fast and failed policies, no check on who's crossing the border, and that Kamala's more incompetent than Biden. And Elon and Trump were both saying, like, look, not a country unless you have a secure border and secure elections. And then Elon's talking about immigration, like, look, who do you want on your team, right? You want to be able to recruit and, the top people. So it's more of a sort of merit-based immigration type of idea, I think. And Elon said, look, he went to the border and he saw it for himself. People are streaming over like a zombie apocalypse. And again, paraphrase. And then Trump talked about other countries and stuff. And again, a lot of these things we've heard about before. So it's a lot of the sort of greatest hits coming back here from Trump. But Elon was saying, look, this is an existential issue for the USA. If we have another 4 years of this unchecked immigration, my paraphrase, I'm not sure we have a country anymore. Okay. So it's an Elon paraphrase. And they both were talking about, like, that the rest of the earth is coming in, that yes, the borders with Mexico, but everyone's coming in. So they're flying in or doing whatever like that. Inflation and foreign policy. They said inflation is caused by oil. Trump says, so this, again, we've talked about this on the show, a supply side inflation situation. So in that case, with this supply side inflation driven, the rates don't really, that's maybe even secondary. Okay. So just lowering rates doesn't help the supply side inflation, particularly when it's energy that is an input for really almost every business out there. Like, every business has air conditioning or heating or shipping or lights or whatever that it is, right? And talk about global security better under Trump. Trump negotiated with leaders better. They talked about, like, could you imagine, Kamala with Chairman Xi and stuff like that. And Elon kept saying, like, look, the whole world's put in danger. The U.S. president is not tough enough. And then they talked about Israel. They talked about, oil, that it's, Trump, it's all about oil. That's where the money is. And then they talked about, like, Trump, like, this wouldn't happen if I was there. And they both kind of came back to the issue of the World War III, the nuclear threat. This is very real. There's 5 countries that have it. And that, look, people sort of, because we have been living without that sort of threat for a while, that maybe there's a discounting out there. And they both were saying, like, look, this can spin out of control faster than you think. This is a serious situation. Trump talked about building an iron dome over us. Then they went on to talk about the deep state, and quote, and Trump's like, quote, we have some really bad people in our government, and sometimes the threat from within is worse than the threat from outside. And they also said that Obama, Biden, and Bush to a certain extent forced Russia and China to work together. Trump paraphrased. And Trump kept coming back, like, the biggest threat is not to the world, is not climate change, it's nuclear war. So he talked about that. Then he talked about the economy, most important issue, says Trump. Kamala and Biden won't do an interview like this. They both talked about that. And then they both talked about Trump, inflation's eating you alive, can't afford it. And then Elon says inflation. And this is funny because, Paul, and again, listen, Elon, whatever, but I know Dan Bongino's tweeted out your stuff. I literally had just posted to, I think, a Duke professor, Duke, very, very highly rated school. And I think he may be at the business school. And I went through an extensive analysis, so much so that other PhDs started, I like what you wrote. They started adding me and stuff like that. And I went through this about how, inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. What I was saying was very similar to what Elon's saying here. And again, I'm not alleging, who knows, great minds think alike, whatever like that. But what's good about that is the message is, however it's happening, the message is starting to get out. Now, I know Elon, I think, has retweeted you, Paul. I believe that's right. You correct me if I'm wrong. I know you've been big on X. And I mean, this is a person that, yes, he owns X and owns Space X and owns Tesla, or definitely, obviously a major shareholder. I mean, some of the public companies, multiple owners, but he's also someone that's also very, very engaged, even on a granular level. And so, if him or his people think that something or whatever, I know, anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point is, what he said is, Elon was saying that if the money supply increases faster than goods and services, that is inflation. So what did I say before? Too much money chasing too few goods. And he kept saying that that government causes inflation, comes from government overspending, and that we need, and this is a really good point, I think Elon kept hammering on, we need a government efficiency commission, something to actively pare down the regulation. Now, this, I think, comes a lot from, I was saying this as well. I kept saying about smart, regulation. I said that in my post there. But also, Bill Gurley did a great talk. I think it's 2856 miles or something like that at the All In podcast. Now, the All In besties are connected and friends with Elon. Direct. So, that's definitely something. And Bill Gurley is a benchmark VC. A serious heavy hitter in Silicon Valley. That's definitely someone that Elon might listen to. And Bill Gurley, the whole talk was lowering regulation, how regulation, protects the incumbent. So this messaging is getting out there. And again, I would tag the All In people. So there is this echo chamber, I think, that works out there. Trump talked about drill, baby, drill. Heating and cooling prices have to go down. He praised Tesla. And so, yeah. So, and also Elon wants to be on the commission. So Trump's like, well, maybe you could be on the commission. And Elon's like, yeah, I'd love to help on the commission. And that says that Elon's a great cost cutter. I think he was talking about maybe X. They also talked about President Milei in Argentina and how that used to be a very prosperous country. Government ruined it. And now Elon, it got out of control. And now, with hyperinflation, different things like that. And now President Milei is starting to cut into that and work on that. They talked about Reagan and stuff like that. And then there's also they kind of closed on some general policy. And I kind of threw everything in here, that Trump wants to close the Department of Education, move it to the states, thinks he can cut costs by like 50, 60%. And that the only way states will change is if some of these states go bankrupt and don't get bailed out. That's an Elon paraphrase, but Trump's like, well, there's some issues with that. Then they talked about that Trump was going to try to reduce debt. I remember that until we got hit with the pandemic. And then, they went into different things. Now, one of the things, just closing on this, I'll hand it back to Paul. One of the things that Elon talked about, they're both pro high-speed trains and some different things, is that Elon's like, look, I used to be a moderate. I would even consider myself a moderate Democrat, right? And Trump's like, I actually consider you liberal. But that Elon's like, the reason I had to endorse you is that we're in a real juncture here. We're in a real crossroads. This is a very important election. And Trump said, like, this is maybe the most important election in American history and stuff. And they talked about that at the end. But what they were saying is, like, Biden, I thought Biden was supposed to be a moderate, and, Scranton Joe. So Paul, I'm sure we'll talk about that, of how Biden was sort of campaigned, if you will, or packaged, if we will, by the political folks out there in terms of the campaigning. But like Biden, what Elon's saying, paraphrase, is that Biden governed as a leftist, and Kamala's even more left. So, remember, Elon, Tesla was based in San Francisco, based in Fremont out there. Twitter X was in San Francisco. So, Elon has definitely, I'm sure, checked the policies and dealt with, a lot of politicians out there. Kamala was AG out there, was from the, originally from the Bay Area, now out of, I believe, in LA. Her and her husband, I believe, live in LA. And of course, she's in, vice president, so in DC. But in terms of before that, and the policies of the California Democrats out there, so Governor Newsom and the rest of it. And so Elon's very, very concerned about this. And there was different things out there. And here's the quote I'll leave it with. Elon, Kamala is far, far left. And I think we're in massive trouble with the Kamala administration. And that's an honest opinion. And I think it's really important for you, Trump, to win. And so then, Elon also talked about the EU letter about this and stuff like that, and how they just both wanted to return America to sort of the American dream and an optimistic vision here. So Trump will kind of focus more on the American dream. And Elon talked about like innovation, like moonshot stuff, Mars and tunnels, stuff like that. But basically that, Elon closed on like, look, it's very, very simple, right? You need like secure borders, lower inflation, smart regulation. You need, safety. And he talked about his mom being assaulted out there, or not his mom being assaulted, but just friends of hers and stuff like that in New York City and stuff like that. And I think here's the paraphrase: we want safe and clean cities, secure borders, to stop lawfare, responsible government spending and regulation. It's not even Republican positions. It's just common sense. So that's kind of where they were at, Paul. Was I correct in that assessment? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that was a really good overview. The only things I would add to that is I thought they had a really good, as I kind of alluded to earlier, they had a very good and nuanced discussion about energy and climate change, basically like timetables of kind of when things have to get, when they believe things need to get fixed by. Of course, it's quite a bit into the future. The other thing I will mention is that they talked about the censorship thing with the EU or whoever sending the letter to Elon today to try to get him to not do the spaces tonight. Everything else I think you covered really well. And I'll keep this short. What you said about Scranton Joe. Look, basically, and I know this from being here in Pennsylvania, which was one of the key states in 2020, there was exactly what Elon said. The way that Joe Biden was packaged was you get Trump, or you get Trumpism without Trump. And you don't have to deal with Trump, and Joe's moderate.
That's right.
As Elon said,
that's my recollection.
That's what he thought, but that's not what happened. Now we are seeing a similar thing with Kamala. Hey, no taxes on tips. I care about the border. So we're kind of seeing a replay of 2020 in Trumpism without Trump. And yes, I do think that's what we're seeing now. And I'm glad that Elon pointed out, I believe that. And now he's too smart to believe it again.
Right. And absolutely. And so a couple points I'll say here as we wind down is that on the climate change thing, Elon's like, look, I'm not against oil. And obviously he, is a major owner and of Tesla and stuff like that, and was a founder of Tesla. And one of the things that he said is that, listen, I'm not, in my opinion, I believe that's right. I would double check that. But what he said is basically like, I'm not against oil and gas, but I think we need to move to sustainable energy and stuff like that. Maybe it's 50 or 100 years. It's not like this super like, oh, the world's ending tomorrow in 5 years to 20 years, like AOC or Al Gore, something like that, or whatever their time frames are. I'm not saying that's their time frame, or whatever their time frames are. But faster is obviously better, and it's not just for an energy thing. There's a finite amount of energy, but it's also for how much carbon dioxide's in the air and pollution, things like that. And they both talked about that. So I think that was actually, yes, that was very helpful to bring that up as well, Paul. Now look, I think that, this was a very, very good talk. I think it's 3 hours. It shows that Trump can really go. I think that it shows he has the horsepower. Sure, he came back to some of the talking points and things like that. But as you said, go ahead. You want to say something?
All I want to tell you is that it was not 3 hours. In other words, the space started early. And so they started early just so it'd be running. And then they had technical issues. It actually began at about 8:40 p.m. Eastern time and ended at about 10:47 Eastern time. So it was just about 127 minutes.
Okay.
It actually ran.
That makes more sense. I appreciate that. I appreciate that correction, because I'm seeing it right here of what it said. But it was early, and there was a DNS attack, stuff like that. And look, I mean, this is the thing, and I want to say this because, and I'm going to be very careful of what I say. Like I said, I talked to a lot of leaders today. It was just that day people were hitting me up, blowing me up my phone, if you will. And I was, texting some people too. And so I was having some interesting conversations, and, people like to talk to me because they know what I know what I'm talking about. But I think that, one of the people I was talking to, I would consider them like socially liberal, fiscally conservative, capitalist, kind of whatever like that. And again, you see a lot of this in Silicon Valley, you see a lot of this in New York City, right? And so, in my opinion, and they're super excited for Kamala, and it's over for Trump and everything like that. And it's like, and I say, well, wait a minute, like, are you at least bothered by the, what about the 14 million people that voted in the Democratic primary? All right, I just blew right past that, in my opinion. And I'm not alleging anything, but it's like, wait a minute. As Elon and Trump were talking, like, that's the point. Okay, that's a central point. Like, you can't just have this, if the voters aren't in charge, and this is what Elon was saying and what Trump was saying as well, in my opinion, then the whole thing fails. And we're at a situation, we're in a precipice right now, a crucial precipice, and both Elon and Trump were talking about this, where you just can't have this. You can't have this, okay? And so, I think this is really, and even Elon says, like one of the things I said here, he hasn't been political. This is about Elon and supported Obama. He's not a quote unquote dyed in the wool Republican, really a moderate Democrat historically, but we are at a critical juncture in the country. Biden was supposed to be a moderate and he was not. He was left, and Kamala is even farther left. And brought up by a Marxist economist. I think I heard that. I may have heard the minister. I'm not alleging anything. It's my paraphrase, my recollection, my opinion.
That is correct.
Okay. He says, look it up. He meaning Elon, has experienced quite a bit of lawfare himself. And this is his honest opinion from a historic moderate. I think we should support Trump, and we're in pretty deep trouble if we go the other way. That's an Elon Ruff paraphrase. And so having that conversation with that person today, who is this is a serious leader, runs a major company. And it's a scary situation. Now, I have to give props to people like Elon Musk, people like David Sachs, people like, we got something over here. This is Wall Street choker here. Joe, Trump just talked for approximately 2 hours. I'll come back to my point in just a second. For 2 hours on a one-on-one after holding a 90-minute RNC speech. This is a flex over Kamala's 20-minute speeches at her quote-unquote rallies. I got to agree with you, Wall Street. I got to agree with you. People are seeing it now. There is a stark contrast right here. And I guess what Elon's point is, Paul, is, in my opinion, look, this is when I'm talking this as a business leader. If you do not have the people in charge, what do you have? If you could just ignore the prime, you and I were talking, not to air you out, just the other day about how there's discussions and rumors about how maybe it's not going so great with Walz and maybe they're going to dump him. I mean, we're not even at the Democrat primary yet. They're having virtual nominations. If look, I went to law school at Berkeley, okay, and stuff like that. Top law school, one of the top for constitutional law, stuff like that. Took constitutional law, I believe, from Professor Yu, but he was my research. Sorry, he was my advisor for the Federal Society and stuff like that. And I was vice president of the Federal Society for UC Berkeley Law. But anyway, the point of it is the process is important. Why do we think we have a constitutional amendment of due process? If you do not have due process, you do not have justice, in my opinion. Okay. And if the voters are not involved, if we can just hot swap candidates, and when the polls go down, I mean, this is insane. And Sachs said the same thing I said. He's University of Chicago law school, great law school. I almost went there, phenomenal law school. It's like, dude, you can't have that situation. This is super critical. So anyway, that's what I would say right there. Paul, any final comments that you have with this? I mean, I think that Elon because I don't want to gloss over that point. I want to hammer that point together, that they said a lot of stuff. They covered a lot of issues. But I think the fundamental issue that they both came back to is that the administration is left. Kamala is even farther left. And the process of the voters being in charge is absolutely critical. And you look at what the Democrats have done, and that's not looking super promising, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, look, and I'll just say this, that in closing, the most important things that Trump was focused on, and you already alluded to this, the three things that he most was focused on in this talk that he wanted to make sure he got across were the economy, immigration, and the threat of global conflict. Those were the three things that he kept coming back to over and over again.
Absolutely. But I would say, again, that I think Elon, Sachs, the Andreessen Horowitz, a lot of people have stepped up, JD Vance, and a lot of leaders have stepped up that from traditionally liberal places, a lot of, New York and others like that are saying, hey, I need to step up here. This could cost me something, because we're at a really important point here that it's gone a little bit too far. They see what's happening, and again, around the globe. So very interesting situation, very interesting conversation. This is our first reaction. May have another reaction later tomorrow or something like that. I think a lot of people are going to be talking about this. I think Elon's right that hundreds of millions of people are going to watch this, at least some parts of this interview. What impact do you think this is going to have out there, Paul?
I think it's going to have a big impact. because it allows people to listen to Trump unfiltered. And Elon was clearly crafting it and said several times about moderates and about independents. That's who this is focused on.
So let me spin this forward real quick. Exit questions. We have the Democrat convention coming up soon in Chicago. Do you think that Kamala Harris stays with Walz? I mean, there's been an increasing criticism. Vance has been out there on the Sunday shows, and I think he did a really, really great job there. And we have a dynamic now where Trump is talking direct with this is a huge thing. Vance is going out there doing the shows. Kamala is talking about maybe she's going to do an interview at some point this month. There's discussion and debate on the debates. Trump wants 3. Kamala's committed to maybe 1. Do you think we're going to have it? Do you think Walz stays in, number 1? Number 2, how long does this dynamic continue where we have limited access to the press and with Kamala, or do things like this discussion tonight put pressure on that campaign?
I'm 50-50 on Walz. There's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of baggage there. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I think that Kamala is most likely going to not do an interview before the convention and then try to roll out an interview with the friendly outlet and maybe like policy positions after the convention.
Very interesting. And I heard that I've heard out there that Trump's kind of holding back on some of the advertising before that. And I can understand why. Think of how much money he spent on Biden, and now they switch candidates. So it's very interesting out there. Last thing I'm going to say, Wall Street puts out here, based on Trump's track record, he has my vote and his ability to keep Iran, Russia, and China in their lanes. Very interesting. Paul, thank you for joining us here. Thank you out there for watching us. Very interesting conversation between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. We try to cover 2 hours ish in about 26 minutes here. So we definitely appreciate that. For Paul, I'm John D. Villarreal. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.